Kyle Meredith here. It's Ellis Ludwig-Leone from San Fermin, and welcome back, man.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to see you. You say us because there is a full band, but we
it's
get
just
the
me.
face.
That was actually me and God I was referring to. You know?
That's nice. You know, he's always with you, just always here on the shoulder. Don't ever hand him the wheel. He's not that good of a driver. I guess that's technically Jesus take the wheel. But whatever it is. Hey, I want to congratulate you because Jackrabbit is a great record, and it's exactly the record that you told me you were going to make. You and I met in Indiana, a few years ago, and you were like, I'm going to do this record that's going to be a little bit different than our first record, and it's going to be more pop-driven and radio-friendly, and you did it.
Yeah, well, thank you. I guess I was sort of, I might have been misrepresenting it a little because I think I had already written some of it at that point.
Yeah,
so.
you'd actually said that. You'd been working on it and everything.
Yeah.
But that's still, like, you came from a classical background, and it's been storied at this point, all the parts going to Yale and being a part of the music there and piano since you were 8 and all that stuff. Sure. Is it so when you're saying, though, like, I'm going to write a more pop record, which, in all fairness, this is still an abstract record with lots of art inside it. But compared to the first one, is it more of a challenge to kind of hone in on something like that? Or is it actually a vacation since most of the stuff that you deal with is a lot more complex?
It's actually, I thought it was... maybe the funny thing about that is that for me it's harder. It was hard because I think writing a good pop song, there's so much competition, so many people are trying to do that, and you can make a really good pop song. Like there are songs that I feel like are as good as any song I know that are unqualifiedly pop. But for me it's very difficult because it's like it's the difference between a couple of melodies and a couple of lyrics, and so it was a really cool challenge.
I've heard pop stars talk about it like, oh, you think it's easy? Because everybody says, I could have written that song.
Yeah.
I could have written that song. And it's not exactly like that because, well, most pop ends up being generic because it's just too smooth or too fleshed out or something like that. So actually kind of find that sweet spot.
I think I'm not speaking in defense of all pop music because I think there's a lot of stuff that is assembled in a kind of a little bit of an assembly line kind of way that isn't always great, but like You Can Call Me Al, the Paul Simon song, that is totally a pop song, and it's also definitely one of the best songs that's been written.
The amount of words in that song is amazing, and the words themselves are amazing in that song.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's not trying to like pander to anyone with that song. It's just that's what makes sense for that sentiment.
Paul Simon's a good guy to look up to.
Yeah,
you can pull that off.
He's definitely one of them for sure.
Yeah. So the other side of that, and I say it is still an abstract record, it's a really dark record on top of it. Like when I go through the lyrics and even the song title, like on the deluxe edition, there's no devil.
Sure.
And just that 2 words there conjures up a lot of imagery. Yeah. But the album starts off with the woods.
Right. Tell
me about this, because this, to me, if I'm looking at the surface, is a story about 2 kids that go into school, one gets murdered. That's what it looks like, right?
Yeah. It's sort of the song for me when I was writing it really was about, it's a metaphor. When I was a kid, I lived in the woods, and I used to go out with my friends all the time, and we'd like catch animals and frogs and it was like my favorite thing to do. And I remember very clearly one time going out, maybe in like 5th or 6th grade, going out with one of my friends, and we like were doing the same thing, and then like he wanted to like torture the animal. And it was such a crazy moment for me in my life because it was suddenly confronting something really ugly about being human and growing up. And I think in some ways that's what I'm trying to do with my music, is not just the ugly, but confronting sort of essential things about coming to grips with who you are. And I wanted to set the stage for sort of a larger drama with this sort of very small memory.
Yeah.
Though if you read it through, it is a little more, if you read it literally, it's a little scarier.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, like, you could write horror. I mean that seriously, because when I read your lyrics, I mean, you are a poet. The style of lyrics you write is not a generic style. It's a very specific poetic style, but it's also dark. I mean, it's easy to make a comparison to Poe within this record.
Sure.
Or something like that. And I wonder about your friend too. Is he a serial killer at this point? Because I think that's one of the.
I think he's doing just fine. I think he's got a family. But
you hear about that. Like, what are the traits of tortured animals when you were a kid? Right. That's where it starts.
No, like he ended up all right. But You know, you mentioned Poe. I think like just in general, thinking like a novelist or like a poet in some way, like for me, it's very helpful to divorce myself, like actually remove myself from the songwriting a little bit. I'll think on the first record, I thought in terms of characters. You know, I think a little bit like I'm writing a story because I'm not singing it, so it really is outside of me. And so there's a little bit of that aspect to it.
But there are themes that seep through it. Through the first half of this record, the word lonely pops up so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess, from what all I know about musicians, that's not surprising. You're on your sophomore record.
Right.
You know, I can look at it and kind of think, oh, the success of the first record has kept him on the road so long, and naturally you're going to get themes of loneliness. Yeah. And, that plays into to the title track, Jackrabbit, that plays into Emily, which has become this great, hit off the record.
Sure.
And of course, I think it's in the woods and a few other spots as well.
Sure.
I mean, is that accurate? Is that do you see it now that you can kind of look at it even in the recent past? It's a lonely thing.
I think the thing that was so jarring between the first and the second record, and one thing that I sort of am still coming to grips with, is there is a tonal shift. I think the first record, while there's a lot of talk of big issues, and I mean, it starts with someone standing on a balustrade. I mean, it's, looking out and contemplating jumping. So obviously there's a lot of, there's like a lot of high drama there, but I think there's a warmth to that record that isn't on the second record. And I think that had to do with the abrupt lifestyle change that I was not expecting. And suddenly I was always gone, always on the road, and especially because we were going to all these cities for the first and second time, I felt really like constantly sort of dragged, away from home.
Right.
And I think the lack of home and the sense of loneliness and not being with the people that you have surrounded yourself with for years and years definitely sort of seeped in all, from all angles.
And how could you not?
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be. Have you figured out how to deal with it at this point? Like, have you gotten better at it?
One thing that helps is just having been to places before.
Okay.
Like I've been, this is our first headline show here, but we've done some festivals. Like I've been to Louisville, we were last night, we were in St. Louis.
Right.
And the night before we were in Chicago. And like now that we, actually just recognizing landmarks.
Sure. Gives you a bit of better sense.
As prosaic as that sounds, it's totally like, oh, okay, like at least I know sort of what's happening here,
Yeah.
And then also I think the band has gotten a lot closer. And in doing that, it's sort of filled kind of a familial role for me, and that helps. So I think I'm on the upswing.
Yeah. How did this record end up with a deluxe edition? Like, where did No Devil come from? Was that always a part of it, or did you find that a little bit too late?
I found it. No Devil happened because it was definitely after the record had been done. In fact, it was actually after the record had been put out, and I was sort of I had some sketches for it, kind of right around the time that we put the record out, and I finished it, and that song is about guilt of being away, and feeling like you're running from something, which also is a theme all the time on my records, especially on Jackrabbit, but also feeling like trying to absolve yourself of the guilt of running, that it's okay to embrace that sort of feeling. And I felt like it worked enough with the record that it should be on this one and not on a future thing.
Because that's a trust right there. Like, I know when you're an artist, there's always somewhere in the back of your mind the fear, like, what if the next song doesn't come or something like that?
Yeah.
So when you're just kind of tossing a song out there and be like, no, because No Devil's a great song. It's obviously a single. It's being pushed as a single and everything like that.
Yeah.
You're giving that up for a possible, like, that's a lot of trust in your next record right there.
I know. I thought about that was, we were also, there was some logistical stuff. We were about to go on this tour with Alt J. And so I just finished the song, and like this Alt J tour was going to expose us to a large audience, and we'd have things to do, radio sessions to do across the country with it. And so our manager was sort of suggested that was also not a bad idea. But really, I do have confidence when I write. I think that there's a certain way of approaching music that I learned as someone who's writing instrumental music. Like someone asks you to write a piece, you got to write it. It's not like you cannot write it.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a little bit of that sort of pragmatic thought in how I plan out how I write.
So do you know where you're going with the next record?
It's starting to form.
Are you finding the themes there? I mean, is this another personal autobiographical thing about your own shift in?
Yeah. I think the next one, I could talk to you much better about it in about a month.
Yeah, and we can do that as well. You know,
Yeah.
I know that's a bit unfair to kind of throw that out there at this point.
I think one thing that I've started to become more confident in is my own framing of my own life.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit more of a personal sort of inward look on the next record as to, as opposed to, I think there's sometimes on the other records there's a little bit more of a sense of like, and this is how things are, and this is what I'm scared of.
Right.
And maybe it's actually, and why, why am I scared of that?
It's therapy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of that, but also who knows? Like maybe the next song will be about ice cream. I don't know. It could be anything.
I'll be interested if it is. I know in the meantime you've got other stuff going on. You wrote for ballet that happened. I've got here composer in residence for the Alabama Symphony. Are you going to be doing more of this stuff?
Yeah, and actually we have some things. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to announce it yet. We have some things coming up that are similar in the pretty near future. I'll be writing for some more people, and also the band sometimes plays with orchestras, which is a really fun thing. We actually did the other night in Chicago. We played with a sort of a mini orchestra, which is always a thrill for me because I get to hear the songs exactly how I want.
It's kind of cool though because success in this game that you're in, the pop game, whatever. Success, it's hard.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, there's a lot of competition, and to kind of have this as a fallback, to have that classical, thing where maybe there's always a job there, something like that's gotta help. That's gotta take the pressure off a little bit.
And it also gives me like an outlet for a certain kind of writing. I think on the first record, that was the only thing I had going on. I was like, I'm just gonna write this thing. And so I felt like everything that I had to say had to get squashed into this record. Right. And now I have ballet going up at New York City Ballet next month. I went up a couple months ago as well. And then I have orchestra stuff and some, choral work. And it's nice to sort of spread out a little bit musically because you can push things in further directions than you could over the course of a 50-minute record.
Right.
And that feels really satisfying. And it's cool that they feed each other.
And as a fan, it's like you give us so much more. Right. For a lot of bands, you get the album every few years, and maybe if you're lucky, you get a B-side or something like that. But with you, if you're a hardcore fan,
you can go see the orchestra.
There's just so much other cool stuff to be a part of, and it is exciting to watch you. Congratulations on Jackrabbit, and I look forward to everything that comes next, man.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me back.
For stopping by.
Yeah.
Fermin, Jackrabbit. It's out now.